welcome online. This is the first meeting of the Oceania, as I can get the spelling right, Oceania Ecological Forecasting Initiative. I'm coming to you from the land where the traditional owners are the Muanina people, and I pay my respects to those that have passed before us and acknowledge that where I am in Tasmania, these are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm coming from. In the invitation today, there was a short agenda that said how we plan to interact. If you don't have in the link to the meeting, there's an online live agenda, which you can click on if you wanted to follow along. We won't share that just yet. One of the things that we're going to do a little bit later is share a Miro board. And in the chat, I also pasted the Miro board link. And as more people join, I know if I paste it again, it shows up. In order to be an editor on this Miro board introduction at on item number 4, you need to have registered to get access. Otherwise, you'll just be a viewer of what we do on the Miro board. So, welcome. About a year ago, the Ecological Forecasting Initiative out of the US hosted a group of Australians and New Zealanders to chat about what might be the options. And between Belinda, Glenda, and myself, we've kind of reached out to our community a bit over the last year and thought that we would try and get an Oceania chapter going and try and build a community of ecological forecasters in Australia. We have both a mailing list, a Slack channel, and a website. Between those 3 things, I hope it's a way that we'll be able to keep in touch and share that with others who'd like to join these activities. You'll see the website link is in the agenda there. All it does is set out a nominal schedule of discussions over the next 6 or 8 months. As you can see, it's a draft because we wanted to develop it with this group online, but we thought some of the things would be both knowledge sharing about how different groups are trying ecological forecasting, as well as perhaps some techniques activities or some data access activities, but we will take that as feedback as we go today. As far as saying hi to everyone online, we can all see faces and hopefully your name is showing up next to your face, which is. We won't go around the room and say hi because we'll do that in the 4th part here where we talk our way through the Miro board. So if we can, please, let's hear a little bit about ecological forecasting. And my toss of the coin then went to Glenda first. Will you share your screen? And she will give you one version of what ecological forecasting is. Belinda will then follow with a companion and non-overlapping version, we hope.
Thanks, Alistair. And hi, everybody. We're really pleased to have this conversation with you. And this is a repeat of something we delivered earlier, so it's not particularly for purpose, but it should get us started. So we want to just think about forecasting together. And there's a swathe of logos down the bottom, which some of you may be working in these entities or be aware of them. And of course, the International Ecological Forecasting Initiative, OEFI. Can we hear me now? It went on mute when I pushed it forward. That's a new one. Yes, I wanted to think about some conversation starters, and particularly, do you agree that nature is predictable? If most of us do modelling, we've got some kind of internal process where we anticipate this for the systems that we're trying to model. We also know that this group will likely be diverse, and that's going to be a great thing. And therefore, we might all have something different about forecasts that we're interested in. And today's about gathering that information from you. Another dimension I'm interested in is how comfortable people are generally with uncertainty or probabilistic forecasts. And if we, a modelling community, are, how do we bring more people on board for that that may not be so comfortable, and particularly what we think of as the end users of forecast or stakeholders. And we'll talk in the 4th section, as Alistair said, about what you might want to bring to the community yourself. So what is an ecological forecast? Quite simply, it's something based on, for me, time series data. It's about anticipating the future, and it's about predicting out of sample. So forecasts then can be a subset of prediction in a more general sense. And you all might have slightly different opinions on just where you see those boundaries, and we can hear about that as well. So people generally understand forecasts from either a technical side or a storytelling side. And on the left, on the left, we've got an example here of a quantitative model for a greater snow goose. So it's actually a population model. And the colourful area is showing the forecast of the model and also the uncertainty around that. On the right, I've got an example here of something that's more like a pictograph or an icon-based thing, where we're looking at the Aussie grass model depicting pasture growth and resilience in terms of risk over a 6-month period. And really, it's for a very broad audience to think about whether their pasture growth is at very low risk in the green or very high risk in the red. So it tells a story at a very big picture level. So there's some things that are visuals and some that are mathematical. Most people also think about scenarios and outlooks in this context. So what makes a forecast good? It's going to be consistency, quality, and value. And I'm going to stop there and let Belinda tell us some more things about forecasts. There's plenty more, and these are just conversation starters. Thank you.
Okay, hang on 1 second. Trying to find my slides. There we go. Right, so I also not entirely prepared for this, and I'm just using the slides from the recent Turn webinar on ecological forecasting, which is still online, and recommend revisiting that because it did have a lot of really interesting ideas in it. The talk that I gave that day really just showed some of the classic ecological forecasting slides from, I think most of the talks that I've seen from the Ecological Forecasting Initiative start in the same place, with Clark's classic paper, this crazy diagram from Mike Dietz, explaining the idea behind near-term ecological forecasting and how it can help us really move towards better predictive capacity for ecological systems. I like to think about forecasting as different types of questions, and this framework is actually borrowed from Ben Smith, who describes them as being what, why, and how questions. And so the what questions really being about forecasting the state of a particular variable, such as pasture biomass or soil moisture into the future. Why questions being about trying to understand why we're predicting the patterns why we see the patterns that we do, and whether we can apply process knowledge to predict out of sample. And then how questions, which are really about management decisions. So how do different management levers affect ecological outcomes, so that we can use that information not just to be prepared for what might be coming at us, but also try and manage for what's coming at us. I'm just going to skip to the end here as well. So these are very general questions that are addressed by everyone who's doing ecological forecasting. There are some things which are quite specific to the Australian or Oceania context. Hang on, oops, sorry. So one of the particular challenges that we face is around variability. And so this diagram is just demonstrating the coefficient of variation in precipitation in Australia is quite significantly higher than in other parts of the world. And that does make prediction a lot more difficult because we've got such variability to contend with. there is another question around, what is actually predictable. Glenda just said this. It's also a question that I think about a lot is to what extent can we actually forecast things in our environment? And this question goes back to chaos theory and Bob May's classic papers about ecological systems and the fact that some of them actually really aren't predictable. And then another challenge that we face is around data availability. And so I guess that's another conversation that we could usefully have within this group if you want to make forecasts based on time series data, you need access to those time series data. And we have some challenges in Oceania countries getting hold of the sort of data at the time, in the time frame that we might need for ecological forecasting. So there's another set of questions for discussion. Back to you, Alistair.
Beauty, thank you. We're calling ourselves an Oceania chapter. Glenda, will you describe the parent organisation and how different chapters might be contributing around the world?
So the Ecological Forecasting Initiative, we've got Quinn Thomas on the call here, and I think Quinn is probably better placed to give you the origin story, but I will actually just say it's a community of practice, it's a grassroots organisation. It seeks to enable and support the activities around forecasting, and it has defined various aspects of its work that it then attracts a working group around. I serve as a member of the steering committee, and there's a call out generally for people to nominate into that. And so far they've got some active chapters, one of them in Canada, and there was a discussion about us getting a little bit more activity going in this part of the world. And, we're being brought here and thinking Oceania because it would be really nice to support the broader Pacific. It would be really nice to get the colleagues to reach out to communities that might not on their own find enough colleagues to do a grassroots effort. But it is what we make of it. The community is, as we self-define it, our purpose the same way. And there's really good code of conduct, really good process and policy that we can lean on. There's access to statistical and other kinds of support frameworks. There's groups working on cyber infrastructure. And this is one of the things I really wanted to bring to notice from the Oceania sector, that we can borrow strength. So some of us are contributing into the international effort through OEFI in the United States. And by similarity, we can then bring back some of those tools and maybe just adapt them to the more local purpose. But I do want to invite Quinn to give us a little bit of a comment, if you don't mind, a bit of the origin story, which I know you've been involved with more closely.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Quinn Thomas. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an outsider, but not. The reason why I'm here is I'm actually living in Perth right now. So this is a time zone. We just opened. It's supposed to be here for the full year for sabbatical, and the Western Australian border just opened, and our visa's cleared, and we bought plane tickets, and we moved here for the next. We'll be here for 2 months, and then we're going over to Brisbane for a week, and maybe popping down to Sydney for a little bit. But we're kind of on a little bit of a tour, so I'm here in your time zone, but mostly to be a fly on the wall or answer questions. This is obviously your effort and make you what you want it to be. But as Glenda said, it's the FE is really quite grassroots, and it's full of people who really want to be in it. It hasn't gotten to be the the behemoth of a society that you feel like you have to be in. It's a bunch of people who really want to be in it, and that really results in a lot of energy and excitement. And because of that, a lot of the principles of like open science are throughout. So there's a lot of great resources and a lot of ideas exchanged And the kind of the underlying principle from the beginning has been the idea of a community of practice. And that inherently means that it's about teaching each other, pushing the state of the art, discovering things kind of together, both from the applied and the kind of more fundamental aspects. But it's new. I mean, we had our first meeting in 2019 in Washington, D.C., and that's where kind of the working group concept was developed. There were talks, that kind of thing. And then from there, it sort of kept scaling out. And one of the critical pieces, though, to the whole thing is that there's a program manager behind it, Jody, and that's actually been a critical piece of kind of keeping the effort moving and kind of keeping the foot on the gas for kind of expanding. And I don't know, having that person always kind of making sure the agenda is created. So, having Jody help be behind the scenes to help support this effort too is critical and will, I think, really help move things forward.
Sorry, Alistair, I was just going to say the network coordination funding has funded Jody's position to date, right? So it's a dedicated piece of money for that. But other than that, there's not really a huge bucket of money for just funding forecasting, just to clarify.
Yes, the Ecological Forecasting Initiative is basically unfunded right now. There is an effort within it that got an effort that was funded by the National Science Foundation to forecast neon data and develop a community around that. But that's kind of like it's a subset. And so, part of FE, we have like chapters and working groups. We also have projects. And so, there's a lot of coordination among different kind of projects. Another one is funded by the Sloan Foundation in the US to kind of build connections between the forecasting community and universities that represent kind of traditionally underrepresented groups, particularly Native American focused universities. And so that's another effort, but there's no like chunk of money just to fund FE.
Yeah, as the parent group, Quinn, what the parent group also has conferences and sessions. Tell us about what's called and also competitions, right? Three sessions at conferences, actually host a conference, and then also foster a competition between forecasters. Will you just do us a couple of sentences on each of those three things? Start with the conference.
Yes, so the conference is basically getting, it'll take various forms year to year, but we actually have one in May. The time zone isn't the most friendly to this group. You can imagine that. It is virtual though, and it's May 25th, I think, through 27th, which is like talks and training sessions. And the idea, and the last big one we had was 2019, which was in person, kind of talks, working groups. And then we had one in 2020 that was virtual that focused on envisioning what the Neon Ecological Forecasting Challenge is, which relates to the other point is that one of the things that we sponsor, and this is the particular aspect of the group that I lead as the PI on that project. But we're kind of building a community of forecasters by saying, hey, let's all focus. We like to use the term challenge rather than competition. We want to challenge the community to forecast neon data before it's collected. And so it's our neon data is if folks don't know kind of about the NEON project, it's like federally funded standardized data collection across 81 sites across the US, where the organization doing the collection is not the science organization, meaning that it's just an observatory. It's like the equivalent of pointing a satellite or a telescope to the stars, and then scientists use that data to make discoveries. NEON's like the maintainer of the dish, and so we're trying to focus the effort on this sort of data that we know is going to be coming for the next 30 years and get folks kind of forecasting around that open data, but that obviously has transfers to other things, to empower the community, and we hope that lessons learned on that can be applied to other things.
So in that NEON challenge, do people who are lecturers or working with graduate classes use those as class exercise ever, or are researchers participating in the challenge?
Both. And we've made a big effort to make it more amenable to courses. We've had 5 courses to date use it. Some courses use it as a final project, others use it as kind of the throughout the class, like an actual course on forecasting. But we've adjusted a lot of what feedback we've learned to make it more amenable to the classes, because the semester system doesn't line up when it's basically the timing of when courses are due did line up well with interesting things in the data sets. So we kind of adjusted things so that classes weren't just predicting that trees don't have leaves over the next month because it's winter.
Yeah, beauty. So let's give the first audience feedback. Hands up if you teach other people formally through a university. Go on, Kylie, you stop teaching people? So a few waves, right? Sorry, I didn't see them. The voices switch around. Wave your hand a bit harder if you teach people. Beauty. Marine, hands up if you're a marine orientated researcher. Freshwater. Beauty. Terrestrial. Beauty. So, Quinn, obviously the NEON challenge has more appeal perhaps to the terrestrial forecasting in terms of that example there, but maybe getting some marine options in future would be good too.
The NEON covers aquatics too. We have rivers, streams, and lakes, but it doesn't have marine.
Righty, so the third question about EFI is just participating at another conference with a session, for example. And so, Belinda or Glenda, in Australia, where have you seen special sessions on ecological forecasting? Is it at ESA, for example? Where's that community?
So ESA has held sessions on it, and I can't speak to what was in the latest ModSim conference, but that's another venue that people would find a concentration of modelers that would be doing some subset of forecasting.
Yeah, I think we ran something at ESA one year, and I went to ModSim last year for the first time. It was very good, and we need to figure out a way to get the ecological community there, because I had listened to a lot of hydrological forecasting talks and nothing about plants. But I will mention in passing, ModSim is going to be in Darwin in July next year. And I think ESA is going to be in Darwin as well, but I don't know if it's the same time. Does anyone know when ESA is going to be next year?
Wollongong. November, Wollongong.
No, that's this year.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, next year, like July next year. Might be, there may be some crossover. Anyway, they're the ones that I know of.
Okay, so
the other was the scoping of the National Environmental Prediction System, known now as NEPS. That was done under the NCRIS, National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Roadmap exercise, and Turn run a number of these sessions, as did CSIRO, around the country. So those have passed, and the NEPS is still in the mix, and the National Research Infrastructure Roadmap was released this last week. So it's still discussed in there, but there's no funds or activity necessarily assigned to it. So we were anticipating that Australia would have some capacity building in this area.
Beauty. So out of that, please have a look on the EFI website and consider whether or not you want to be a spectator or a presenter at the next EFI conference in May. That's just an easy sign up online to join that one. What we might do in Australia, though, is think about, well, where would we put a session together that would bring our community together, not for the first time, but again, there. And so ModSim, ESA, any other conferences that folks online have used before and they think there's an interest in forecasting app, show me your hand and wave and yell out another area to think about.
We have an Ausflux conference coming up in June this year, and we'd welcome any presentations on ecological forecasting.
I would also mention AMOS, which is, I think, typically doesn't have a lot of ecology in it.
No. Yeah, no, that's got good, seasonal forecasting, climate forecasts, and more increasingly extreme event forecasts. And so if we're looking to take those in as our base layer for the ecological forecasting, it's, as we all know, it's good to get you good physics into the ecological forecast too. Yeah. Beauty. If that covers us off, I think, Belinda and Glenda, for saying, what's the EFI scope, that kind of thing. We've also got a schedule and plan for the year for this group. And so on the website there, it just says we've got some dates with nominal topics. And so we thought the next one on the 23rd of May could be some contributed talks from this group or others, perhaps 2 or 3 of those talking about your particular forecasting system. And our straw dog was 1 month we'd have a series of participant talks. The odd month we might have a series of, call them upskilling talks. It might be a methodological one and access to data, feedback from how a challenge has gone, all that kind of stuff. And so we will come back to you with suggestions or requests, if there aren't enough suggestions from the group, around topics for the 23rd of May. But we expect a lot of self-nomination and volunteering for, hey, I could give a quick 10, 15, 20 minutes on an area of interest here. Can I have thumbs up that that's a model that will work? It's a community generated one versus a top down us coming to you. So come on, we'll come up with something as a group, right? Thumbs up with me. Mixed response. Okay, a bit lukewarm. Bueller. Thank you. Let us then zip to the kind of the group interactions part. And for this, please have a look at clicking on the Miro board, which I'll go to that one now. I can see it's got a bunch of people in it. Can you give me a wave on the screen if you haven't got access to the Miro board and I need to put that in the chat again? So the mock-up of the Miro board is loosely, it's a little get to know you. And there are 3 columns. Are you generally working in a marine, a freshwater, or a terrestrial application? If you're crossing that, put something somewhere else. And we thought maybe it'd be interesting to see who's doing some operational forecasts where you're cranking the handle on a fairly regular basis and offering that forecast information to someone who is making a decision. Some ideas about if your forecast is in development, if you're happy to put something around there with your name and a region and what you're doing. Maybe you haven't got one in development yet, but you've got some interest in forecasting. That would be another tier option there. And as we look at that, I'm going to try and zoom and then just shout out some names and see if people will talk to their entry, please. So populate away and do the 2-brain activity where you're going to be using your hands in the Miro board as well as then talking to the group online. Eric, will you say hello? And you've put an entry in under, well, I won't describe it or else you'll have nothing to say. Hello, Eric. Didn't like the publicity. Where have we got? Going across to the top right. Sean Walsh. Say hello, Sean.
Right, can you hear me all right?
Hello, yes.
I'm just going to bring up some notes. So the entry I put in was for a bit of software I wrote about 5-6 years ago now. It's being used operationally in Victoria. It's basically a prescribed burn simulator that was built for purposes of a smoke forecasting system. And so what it tries to do is work out essentially how much fuel gets burnt within a burn boundary, a planned burn boundary, on a given day using actual weather forecasts, like 7-day scale. And so the innovation there was to combine topography, vegetation data, and I guess a spatial weather forecast and a bit of sort of bushfire science to try and predict like a time series of carbon and heat fluxes. And from there, the geniuses at CSIRO converted that into, I guess, a chemical profile of smoke emissions. So the relevance for this group, I think, is that that model is only being used for smoke, but it could also be used for, I guess, plant population prediction. So like for a given fire, what parts of the burn boundary actually burn, having regard for things like fuel moisture, and consequently, what are the implications for plant populations?
Beauty, thank you. Over in the freshwater space, Callum, say hello.
Hello, everybody. So I'm a PhD student based at the ANU in Canberra. So my research is pretty early stages at the moment, so I haven't actually done any work yet. So that's why I put it down in the interest category. But what we're looking at is developing a an eco forecast for the Narran Lakes in northern New South Wales, which is a Ramsar wetland site, and trying to forecast vegetation health to help guide environmental watering policy and environmental watering releases. And then this is kind of an exploratory forecast, I guess, and then expanding any methods that we develop for the Narran Lakes to other wetland systems in the northern Murray-Darling Basin.
Great, thanks, Callum. Xiao, you're over in the marine developing something.
Oh, hello. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Yes, my name is Chao Jiao San. I'm a physical oceanographer. I'm based in Perth with CSIRO, and we are doing, through a collaboration with Chinese Academy of Sciences, we have developed a protocol forecasting system for green tide. So there's a 6.5 day forecast that have been attempted last year to predict the green tide, the invasion of the Qingdao city last year, which was very big. So I'm interested in how we can make it a fully fledged operational system, and also how can we develop it for Australia to predict harmful algal blooms, which is more difficult compared to green tide, because if you want to predict the Alexandrium, it's low biomass and high toxicity, and you can't use remote sensing. So that's another can of worms. So I'm very interested in hearing what other people's approaches are. Thanks.
Thanks, Xiao. Hi, Kylie. Your post-it note is next to Xiao's in the marine in development space.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Kylie Scales. I'm Associate Professor and a DECRA Fellow at the University of Sunshine Coast. For the past 4 or 5 years, I've been lucky to work with Jason Hartog's team and led by Alistair, originally forecasting or developing seasonal forecasts for the 5 key target species of the eastern tuna and billfish fishery in Australia using ocean models. So we've been using the Cafe 60 ensemble, which was developed at CSIRO, and the Bureau of Meteorology Access S2 system. And a spin-off from that, one of my PhD students is now working on trying to forecast not just fish distribution, but fish quality. So we know there's a parasitic infection in swordfish that causes their flesh, their muscle tissue, to turn into what is known as jelly meat in the industry. And anecdotally, there's a link with warm water. So she's trying to see whether we can develop a forecast for the industry that's saying when they're more likely to encounter jellied fish or fish that have a significant parasite load that may then cause them to become jellied if they're not handled in a particular way. So always working in the marine system. And what's been cool about the last couple of years is trying to get subsurface data, so understanding the 4-dimensional environment of the ocean and how that can be useful in forecasting.
Thanks. So, and the kinds of things that we forecast is distribution and abundance are common ones, but Kylie's example there is kind of a physiological forecast that perhaps a bit like Sean forecasting a state variable there. Let's go up to freshwater top. Hey, hello. Oh, that's Quinn. Quinn, we are not going to give you a second go yet. I'll come back to you. Come back across to terrestrial. Let's go the middle row. Matthew.
I am a postdoc at CSIRO, and so I just started, and most of my project is going to be based on forecasting mice plagues in the grain growing regions of Australia. So I think this is to do with all the crop yield and rainfall and longer term rainfall and soil properties in particular. Yeah, so I just started, so haven't really started.
This is the community for you then, Matthew. Welcome.
Yeah.
Let's go along the right. Glenda, go back to you. Well, let's work along that middle row now, so you see where you're coming up.
Great to follow Matthew, because we also forecast rodent populations in the arid zone of Australia, but these are native rodents, and also trying to predict the native dasyurid marsupials, which are less conducive to having their populations understood. So it's a long-term study site with colleagues Chris Dickman and Aaron Greenville on the call here as well, and some others. And we actually have data on fauna populations, assemblages, and the vegetation, and even some phenology. But we're being humble at this point. We just want to get our forecasts of populations well in hand. So we'll also later introduce a PhD student of ours who's working on this with us for hunger. So over to the next one. You're up, Belinda.
Representing quite a large group, some of whom are on the call here, but some of the projects. So our group is all about modelling vegetation function, vegetation dynamics. Most of what we're thinking about is more on decadal timescales, but some of the shorter term processes that we're looking at trying to be able to forecast include fire risk, tree mortality from drought, and grassland cover.
Thanks, Belinda. Aaron.
Hi all. I'm working with Glenda Wardle too in the arid zone, developing forecast models for some of our fauna species. So I won't say too much more about that, but also as we design new studies going forward, I'm trying to set up new, ideally long-term projects in other environments. So more locally to home here in the Blue Mountains, but also in agricultural landscapes as well. So keen to hear more about Matthew's project later. How can we set up studies now at the beginning so that they are in a good position, hopefully in a decade time or whatever it might be, if I'm still alive, to use these studies for forecasting?
Yep, beauty. You raised an interesting point, Aaron. Can I do the show of hands model again? Who collects the primary data that gets used in their model? About a third, right. Aaron, what are some advantages of being the primary collector of data rather than just the user of it?
I'm an old field ecologist by heart, so just getting out in the field is
else, huh?
Yeah, but also like it allows you to be there and to think and to observe change that you might miss otherwise. Sometimes that change is good, sometimes it's quite distressing. But being on the ground gives you an opportunity to at least make those observations and try and plan ahead for what should we be collecting.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Jamie.
Yeah, on this line, I'm referring to a study I led up a little while back on looking at the degree of prediction that you can get in agricultural landscapes as a result of both climate variability and land management. So that I'm interested in predictability, or the degree of predictability, not as do you think ecosystems are predictable or not predictable, but there's a whole range in there depending on factors like whether you're irrigating and especially for things like lucerne or alfalfa, whether you're cutting it, if you're trying to predict the phenology of the crop from, say, climate factors, the cutting actually has a large effect on how predictable the growth and productivity of the crop is. I'm primarily not a modeler. I collect a lot of data for the time series data that we heard from earlier that we need for doing forecasts. But I'm also really quite interested in the forecasting, and so I've participated in the design team with Quinn on the Neon Forecasting Challenge. And we're looking forward to the third round next year when we start to throw in some Australian flux data into the mix and hopefully even get some phenology forecasting off the ground.
Thank you. Let's go down to the, what do we call that one? The forecast interest, still in the terrestrial. Jürgen and companion.
Yes. So I guess, yeah, we're both postdocs with Belinda's group. And so we're just, extending about Belinda, and also Jamie already said, so with vegetation models, we usually predict carbon uptake, for example, over decades. And I think we'd be interested in how far that's possible at the timescale of what the seasonal timescale or monthly timescale. I think that has a lot of interesting applications, such as crop yield and how that's modulated by drought and applications like that.
Great. And sideways?
I don't think I have anything else to add. Maybe flammability of vegetation as well.
Sorry, are you Jamie? No. Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
No, I'm Asaf.
Asaf.
So
Thank you.
I forgot to register, so I just went to the next room, and I'll do it next time.
Good. Have Jürgen give you a sticky note in this thing here. Thank you. Yes. Hello, Hannah.
Hey all. I'm a PhD student at the Research School of Biology at ANU. I've never done any ecological forecasting, but I have done modeling trying to link traits with survival and growth in trees. Mostly I think about tropical rainforests, and then also modeling long-term forest responses to climate. So I'm interested in ecological forecasting, both for predicting climate responses and also for thinking about different management interventions.
Yeah, thank you. Sean, I'll take your note as an extension of the first one that you talked about, and just go to Tom, please.
Hello, I'm Tom. I'm a bit different. I'm from Christchurch, New Zealand, and I've always seen the utility of using ecological forecasting, and now I've finally got a toy data set to try and test it on. So I'm just really interested to get all the community and get an idea of how I might conduct this. So I'm quite interested in modelling the population dynamics of Queensland fruit flies and seeing basically when to apply a biocontrol agent on their population to keep their numbers down. And so 1 or 2 weeks, I need to predict their population dynamics so we can fly a plane over and drop sterile males on them. So that's my toy project. I just wanted to get an idea of what you guys do and how I get involved. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Ming Kai.
Hello, I'm Ming Kai. I used to be a postdoc for Belinda, but now I just recently started my own group in China. Since I'm still affiliated with Western Sydney University, I guess I can try to blend in this group. So for my research in China, what I intend to do at the moment using ecological forecasting is to basically predict how crop yields in rice paddy field change in the near-term future, and also how that affects fertilizer use and the downstream eutrophication issues, which has real management implications. And that's all.
Great, thank you. Hey, Quinn, we're back into the fresh water up the top.
I just dropped it in there to highlight one of the principal reasons why we kind of came to Australia is to work with Matt Hipsey at the University of Western Australia on the kind of the modeling system that we've integrated into a data assimilation and forecasting framework for predicting water temperature and water quality in lakes and reservoirs across the U.S. that we're excited to extend to the Australian systems and kind of learn from Matt here at UWA.
Great, thanks. I think we went round the whole board there. Give me a hoy if I missed anyone. Beauty. Let me say one. I'm up in the top left-hand kind of myself in the marine current operational ones. And the two there for Jason and Paige are people I work with. One of them in the Great Australia Bight is we do real-time habitat and up to 2 months seasonal forecasts of where southern bluefin tuna will be found in southern Australia. And that's used by the industry during the summer to go out and work out where they're going to tow their very large catching boats to wait for fish to show up. And you can only tow the boats at about 5 knots. So if you go to the wrong place, it's very difficult to catch up with where the fish are. And so the forecast helps you go out to the location where we expect fish to arrive. It's not fish finding because there's a quota system. And so it's not over exploiting the environment, which is what I worry a bit about with ecological forecasts for resource management. We don't want to use them to catch more stuff in a way. We want to use them for the good, not for the evil. But we've got a big effort in CSIRO and in partnership with Kylie in Queensland, looking at predictability for a whole bunch of marine species. Thank you. So that can be part of our tracker about who we are and how we will solicit contributions from you over the next coming months. What in the bottom part of this Mero board is what do you hope that you would get out of this group? And a really way to think about is what would make you come back for another one in May? Please have a go at populating and typing something in there. They weren't particularly, domain. They weren't particularly domain in lineup. If you run out of them, quickly copy a blank one and paste it somewhere so that you can write in it. And we're really interested in what this community expects out of these kind of discussions. Go for it. And then Glenda, I'm going to ask you to summarize what you see people writing, if you can do some multitasking. And Belinda, your multitasking challenges, as people are writing them, try grouping them into some kind of structure by moving them around. So we're getting some idea of methods, themes, community themes, or so on. So over the top of people trying to type, do some moving around. That could be a game for all players, actually. Create some theme here. Hannah, I can't see your fingers moving. What do you like? What do you hope that you're going to get out of the next couple of weeks? Sorry, not next couple of sessions.
I did it early, sorry. I accidentally entered my answers before we started the activity, so I'm just letting other people have a go. Beauty,
so tell us what you wrote.
I put, it's been moved around. Something about connecting with relevant research community and exposure to skills and tools.
Thank you. All right, Glenda, do your best. How are we grouping out there? What are you seeing coming out?
Look, I think this is already a very community-minded group. So I'm going to start with the community. We've definitely got people coming for community building, and that means they intend to be part of the building, which was really nice. The next group of things is about training, upskilling, skill sharing, learning methods, tools and development and techniques. And another group of ideas I think comes under the networking and developing, so building forward in that regard. So I think people had overlapping ideas under some of those things, but I think what we see is in each other a community that shares some common goals. We have to explore more deeply what those really are. We all have some notion about some skill sharing, which is a really good part for building a community. I'm the one who wrote about the talks. As each of you gave a a snippet. I want to actually hear the backstory and the full story. So I really hope you sign up to tell us a little bit more about these different forecasts that you've teased us with now. So I'm going to leave it there, Alistair.
Beauty. Belinda, you did some rearranging. Any subtlety to it? Do we have enough to go on with?
Yeah, I mean, Glenda's picked out, there's 3 things: community, training, tools, but there's one more, which is the data sources. Someone's put down here data sources, and I think that's that hasn't got its own column, but that's not a small component.
Interestingly, we didn't all say we want a bucket of money. But of course, that would be useful. I personally would like the National Environmental Prediction System or something similar to be picked up. I would really like to see some of the talent that's in this call here have future careers as expert forecasters. And I guess I would also like there to be a sort of a thinking from this group about how we could get some network coordination in this part of Oceania and how we could reach out to the wider parts of Oceania that are not on the call and let them know we're here and we could help a bit, maybe. For our future work, I'd like to have some discussions with yourselves and others about that.
Good point.
Is it too early for our own journal?
Hey, Linda, can you talk about your data analytics centre that you're involved in at some point? I'd really like to hear at some point how that went and what overlap that might have with this group. Just, not necessarily now, but, at some point would be lovely to hear more about what that involved.
I'll give them the one sentence version here. So the ARC, our equivalent of NSF, funds training centres, and they fund particularly a range of training centres linked to industry. So they're to train PhDs. They also can employ postdocs. And the one based here at Sydney, but also networked to University of New South Wales, Western Australian University, now Macquarie and also ANU, and a whole cast of industry partners, is the data analytics for resources and environment with 3 themes of biodiversity, water and resources, mineral resources. So we find ourselves talking with hydrologists, geologists, and all these industry requirements as well as the biodiversity domain. And the students have some pretty kick-ass courses in data science and Bayesian methods, machine learning methods, etc. And then they do a PhD and they should sit with a partner in a placement type situation and solve a problem that the partner wants solved. So they really are quite harmonious with this kind of an approach, and a very good way for thinking about forecasting to get a lift up. And they're very good models, most of them. And Aaron's a CI in this as well.
What did you say was the name of this thing?
It's called DARE, Data Analytics for Resources and Environments. And the scheme is an ARC-ITTC scheme. It's all acronyms, sorry. It's a training scheme. So it funds directly PhD stipends, and that's very, very important for being able to attract the right kind of talent. So a lot of the students are international.
Beauty. I just put one more sticky note down at the bottom there, the ever hopeful one. I'm willing to give a short talk next time. Please have a think about, whether you take Glenda's invitation. We've dipped our toe in with your 2 sentences. Please think about adding yourself into that one, and we would hope to get through this community over the year. Go first, go second, whatever it is. I hope that we're seeing that. As we get ready to round off, I'll just have a quick check through the chat to see if we missed anything there. There are some links, Glenda, that you've posted in there that I'll just add to the Miro board afterwards to capture those ones. Quinn, thank you. A couple of other meeting options were included there. Thanks, Aaron, Quinn, and then Eric, who left. basically leaves us with a quick introduction to who he was. So unlucky, he was the first person I went to in the corner, and he left us a quick chat. Yeah, okay, very different.
The conference link that Quinn put into the British Ecological Society is a really good thing to have a look at. The other thing I wanted to check is, has everybody found a way to sign up for OEFI and get access to the Slack channel? That Slack channel, it's a series of threads and they're really, really good stuff. So I really commend that to you. And we have our own channel within that we can start to use more.
Beauty. So now it's the farewell time of the meeting. Belinda, what are your closing thoughts? Meeting one. Go on, you're getting my style now, right? So Belinda and Glenda and I have never worked together, you guys. So here they are, we're learning each other's style.
Right, I'll be prepared next time. Sorry, I'm just off looking at conference chats. This is great. Thank you so much, Alistair, for giving us the impetus to do this. We really needed someone to crack the whip and get this happening. I think it's really important that we do this. And I, really hope to see it grow from here. We'll be looking back on this with fond memories one of these days. Actually, I'm just going to take a quick little photograph.
Smile. I'm going to add here, Alistair, that next time come along and bring a friend or two. I really like the two that are sitting in the same office. Tell people about us. Make it feel comfortable for them to come and join into the forecasting community, even if they're at the beginning of their journey. It can be, we can make it. It should be inclusive. So bring a student, bring somebody who's maybe going to be an end user of a forecast and see what they think of things. But I'd say reach out to others. I'm going to throw to a couple of other people. Oh, we're over time. Over to you, Alistair. Sorry.
Oh, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us online. And the Miro board will stay as one of our activity spaces through this session. So come back to it as you have other thoughts, and introduce us to your community. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
See you next time.
See you.
Bye-bye.